Hello and welcome to coverage of Round 6 here at Grand Prix Milwaukee. Marie Bartholdi and Reed Duke with you here. Matt Sicking-Johnson on the left side of your screen on mono white aggro versus Owen Turtenwald, ranked 5th in the world on Izzet Drakes. Matt kicking things off very quickly with Sky Marcher Aspirin on turn 1.
Yep, both players with a nice start here. Owen with turn 2 Tormenting Voice discarding Arclight Phoenix, so doing a nice job filling his graveyard, setting up for a powerful turn 3 or 4. But also crucially, he won the die roll, which you can see from Matt's draw that if Owen had been on the draw and had only a tapped land in the face of 4 non-land permanents on turn 2, it would be pretty challenging. As it is, Owen did win the die roll and seems to have a pretty decent draw, so he's got a fighting chance here, but definitely with his back against the wall already here.
What can the Izzet Drakes do to make up from a deficit this early on?
Well, one thing that you'll see the expert players doing with this Izzet deck is doing a lot of blocking with Arclight Phoenix, and I think that's the difference between, holy cow.
This is just like the god draw, as they say from Matt here. Venerated Loxodon coming down and just dumping a pile of +1/+1 counters on all of his creatures.
But to finish that thought, I think using the Arclight Phoenixes as defensive cards is one of the subtleties of this blue-red deck. A lot of people, the first time they pick it up, myself included, you sort of think of it as like some combo deck where you're trying to rush the opponent's life total down with the Phoenixes as quickly as possible. But actually, if you use them as blockers and trade them off in combat, you can put your opponent to some tough decisions and buy yourself enough time to make those giant Crackling Drakes and Enigma Drakes.
So an opt and a Lava Coil here for Owen. And we're going to be able to take care of that Sky Marcher Aspirin as well. And it's enough spells to bring back the Arclight Phoenix. And just like you said, it's on deep.
Yeah, so one good turn deserves another. Owen there with 2 removal spells and a blocker, able to answer 3 creatures. But you see that that's just barely enough to hang in there, as Matt still has 3 attackers, able to transform the Legion's Landing. All of these creatures threaten to trade with the Phoenix, and even the Adanto Vanguard is posing a major problem against the deck with mostly targeted burn spells as removal.
All right, so the turn back over to Matt. Dauntless Bodyguard here, guarding another Bodyguard, and oh boy, Conclave Tribunal is going to take care of that Arclight Phoenix. Huge swing in here. Pass back to Owen, down to 11 after that attack.
So Owen really desperately needs a 4 toughness blocker. Even then, he'll be taking a lot of damage since the Adanto Vanguard can't really be tangled with in combat. But Owen needs something to impact the board, or else he's just dead next turn.
Do some copies of this Izzet deck play any red sweepers at all?
Sometimes you'll see Fiery Cannonade, which would be pretty nice here, although, again, not answering the Adanto Vanguard, and it looks like the fresh Dauntless Bodyguard is surely going to be protecting one of Matt's creatures. So the power and resilience of the mono-white aggro deck, it has 4 creatures on the battlefield, only 2 of them would die to a board sweeper, and that's the best case scenario usually for the opponent.
All right, Goblin Electromancer here for Owen, making our spells a little bit cheaper. Discovery. Shock and a land. The Goblin Electromancer, just super key to this Izzet Drakes and Arclight Phoenix deck. I was talking a little bit to Jelger Wiegersma at the Pro Tour, and I said, if my opponent plays this Electromancer, am I supposed to immediately kill it if I'm able to, or should I save my removal, for the Drakes? And he's like, no, you kill it immediately.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just so important for keeping pace in a matchup like this. I mean, trying to contend with mono-white aggro, almost all of their cards cost 1, 2, and 3 mana and impact the board, whereas the Izzet Drakes deck, you're spending 2 mana on cards that sculpt your hand and don't really have any impact on the game. And that just allows you to fall further and further behind in each early turn that passes. But Goblin Electromancer, doubling or tripling the speed at which you can deploy your spells actually gives you a fighting chance and allows you to keep up.
All right, so we're going to keep a land there. 2 here for Entrancing Melody.
Yep, so that's really nice for Owen, getting to remove an attacker from the battlefield and Well, he's not defending himself with the lifelinking token yet, but for next turn, he'll be able to untap and have a little bit more stability on this board.
So tell me a little bit about the inclusion of this card in the deck.
So Entrancing Melody, I would say its number one purpose is to answer Wildgrowth Walker, which is a perfect fit because Wildgrowth Walker is a cheap creature that can outsize Lava Coil pretty quickly.
Yep.
But Entrancing Melody is going to be great against any deck playing creatures, and you see here Owen being able to cast it at only 2 mana and really have an abnormally large impact on the board, which is what he needs. He was in trouble this game and needed something special like that, and now you see him untapping with a 2/2 lifelink token, and if he has a good turn, he can now stabilize the game because of this Entrancing Melody.
Chart a Course is going to start things off here for Owen on his turn, down to 5 after that last attack from Matt. Is that a Murari's Conjecture in hand?
Yep, Owen does have 1 copy of the Murari Conjecture, so that's sort of a knockout punch if he can find himself with enough time, enough breathing room to cast it. But it might be hitting the bin with a Tormenting Voice here. We'll see what he decides on. His draw is a little bit awkward as he does have 3 sorceries to cast, but they all cost 2 mana, so he would need to find a land. But instead he's going to hang on to the Murari Conjecture and discard Lava Coil.
Interesting. All right. Oh, I see. We've got another removal spell in hand to take down the Dauntless Bodyguard. Arclight Phoenix able to come back, and now we can attack?
Yeah, so perfect. The lifelink able to buffer Owen's life total. The Arclight Phoenix doing a reasonable job at sort of fogging the Adanto Vanguard.
Apparently Owen was calling Murari Conjecture the Predator flagship this morning.
Yeah, that sounds like Owen.
And it looks like just lands left in hand for Matt.
So he's going to be very thankful that he has this Adanto the first for it, but it's pretty tough at this stage of the game for him to match what Owen's doing on each of his turns. Owen with the very full graveyard, the Murari Conjecture coming on one of these turns coming up, whereas Matt doesn't really have anything in his main deck that he can draw that's going to be a huge game changer. He does not have heroic reinforcements. The best thing is going to be something like Venerated Loxodon, but its effect is sort of on suspend.
Right. Owen here is falling down to 3, but remember he's got that 2/2 lifelinker in play. And boom, the Murari Conjecture hits the table. So chapter 1 is return target instant card from your graveyard tree hand, so we're going to take that shock. Matt makes a vampire at the end of turn. See if he can draw any action here. I like it, Murari Conjecture. Get in the deck. Adanto Vanguard keeps beating in. Matt will pay the 4 life. Just to land and say go.
Adanto Vanguard, of course, it's an amazing card against this Izzet deck, but there is some cost. You have to be careful. This Izzet deck can attack your life total somewhat out of nowhere, and you could see that if Matt finds himself at 7 life, he's got to think twice before protecting his Adanto Vanguard from shock, because there could be a burn spell, there could be a maximized velocity, there could be a Arclight Phoenix with haste. So there is a limit to how much you can sink into that Adanto Vanguard.
I think they got the number just right on that 4 life, because you want it to hurt when you pay it. Goblin Electromancer and Discovery here for a single mana for Turtenwald. Got back Entrancing Melody after chapter 2 of the Murari Conjecture. And this game has swung back in Owen's favor. I mean, he was looking like he was done for a few turns ago.
Yeah, this was really expertly navigated by Owen. You can tell that this is the type of game that someone picking up this Izzet deck for the first time may not have won.
Right.
Subtleties like using the Arclight Phoenix on defense, knowing the exact perfect card to discard to Tormenting Voice each turn, knowing when to chip in for damage and when to hold back, and of course Owen's niche card choices of Entrancing Melody and Murari Conjecture both coming in big in this game.
So how hard is it for somebody like Owen to get up to speed on this deck and, make those kinds of plays? Is he just already that good, or was he practicing all past week?
For Owen in particular, yes, he's already that good. Owen is, he has a loud voice on our team in terms of sort of trying to boost everyone's confidence and say, you know what, we're all good enough to play the deck that we need to play. So don't be scared to pick up a new deck. Don't be scared to go outside your comfort zone, because Owen has had the experience of feeling scared and being resistant to playing a challenging deck on little practice. But he told me that once he got over that, his results have been great. You play your first round or two, you're shaking the rust off, you're having a hard time. But Owen's a great player. He's been through this, and he's just going to pick up a deck at a pretty fast speed, and it's more important for him to choose what he believes is the best deck than to choose his favorite deck or the deck that he's most practiced with.
All right, looks like Matt Sicking Johnson completely out of gas after that last attack there. Banalish Marshall, only creature left standing.
And here is going to be Chapter 3 on the Murari Conjecture. Owen with a lot to work with. You could see just with a couple of opts in his hand that he can fill his hand at an astounding rate, 1 mana for 2 cards, not to mention the 2 scries. And his removal spells are a little bit awkward. Matt actually navigating pretty well to make sure he has only 1 creature, because as we know, that Entrancing Melody stealing 2 guys would be devastating.
Oh, yes.
By the way, Owen now thinking in response to the trigger of the Murari Conjecture.
Until end of turn, Chapter 3 says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy.
And Owen had blink of an eye there, deciding how greedy to get. But I think he's sort of realized we're at the stage in the game where, you know what, I don't need to go through the Murari Conjecture a second time to win. I just need to have a powerful turn here, make sure I don't die to some surprise creatures from Matt Johnson, and I'll be all right.
Yeah. All right, so there was the copied opt. We're going to jumpstart Radical Idea there. Finds a Crackling Drake. And we're going to be able to take down that Banalish Marshall thanks to Chapter 3.
Yep, so remember, everything's getting doubled here. That's why that 1 shock really represented 2 shocks, enough to kill Banalish Marshall.
The 2 Arclight Phoenixes in the graveyard come on back. 1 swings on in, 1 stays back.
And I wonder to what extent Owen has heroic reinforcements on his radar.
Oh, sure.
He is not dead to it on the board, and it looks like Matt had no cards in hand, so he didn't have to worry about necessarily a token plus a heroic reinforcements.
Conclave Tribunal is able to deal with one of the Arclight Phoenixes. Shock takes down Vampire Token, and there's Crackling Drake. Draw a card. Thing's going to be enormous. Phoenix swings on in for another 3. Matt falls down to 9. To Owen's 5.
This is pretty much it for Matt. He needs to find Conclave Tribunal for that Drake.
All he finds is a Banalish Marshall, and he's going to scoop him up. That is game number 1. Going to Owen Turtenwald, and a little bit of a smile there on Matt's face as he knows, oh, so close to closing that one out. But Owen able to turn it around in pretty spectacular fashion there with Izzet Drakes.
Yeah, that was fun to watch. You have to think that Matt, with the level of success that he's already had with mono white aggro, he surely was thinking, okay, this is a routine game where my deck is delivering and I'm going to win in short order. But maybe he hasn't faced a player like Owen Turtenwald, who's now gearing his deck and his strategy for beating mono white aggro, maybe things are getting a little harder at this stage of the tournament.
So talk to me a little bit about the Murari Conjecture. What exactly is his number one best case scenario using this card? I suppose there's many.
There are many. This is mostly just a card to drive the nail into the coffin if he's already ahead or stabilized in an even game once his graveyard is filled. And so what we saw in game one, I wouldn't necessarily say it was the best case scenario because it did cost Owen quite a lot to invest that mana up front. And the Murari Conjecture, like most sagas, it's something that you invest in and then it pays dividends over the next 3 turns. However, it did its job. It found Owen 2 removal spells in Shock and Entrancing Melody, and then it led to a very, very big turn on Chapter 3, which put him from a modest advantage to winning the game. You saw that Owen actually was thinking about blink of an eye on Chapter 3, and that's something he can do if the game is still close by the time he's resolving Chapter 3 of the Murari Conjecture, which is that he can blink of an eye his own saga before Chapter 3 resolves and hits the graveyard. So this basically just an engine card, a late game card advantage card, and one that this Izzet Drakes deck can use very well.
Can you tell me a little bit about the decision to go with Drakes this weekend?
Sure, Owen is just a fan of this deck. He had been working on it a lot prior to Grand Prix Atlanta and Grand Prix Lille. Decided not to go with it there since he felt he didn't have really enough time to get it exactly razor honed the way he wanted it. But we had some teammates play it at the Pro Tour to decent results, and Owen just thought it would be fun and a deck that he could maybe innovate on a little bit with the Entrancing Melody and the Murari Conjecture, and here he is so far 5-0 at Grand Prix Milwaukee.
Awesome stuff. And you mentioned it, fun. Like, this is the deck most people are like, if I have something fun I can play in Standard or even in Modern, play Izzet Drakes. It's just a blast.
Yeah, definitely. One of the big names on our team, John Finkel, we sort of knew it was a hopeless cause for him. Once a deck exists in Standard where you can play with Goblin Electromancer and a bunch of cards that draw cards, there's almost no way he's going to choose anything else. So we sort of had that one penciled in from day one, and the rest of the team
That's awesome.
built itself from there.
All right, so heading into this sideboarded game here in game number 2, is it just more of the same? Harder, faster, stronger? Boom?
I think so. This is a matchup where he's not really going to adjust his game plan too much, just focusing, like you said, on beating down, presenting a lot of power and toughness as quickly as possible, maybe tailoring his creature suite to be a little bit more resilient to cheap burn spells like Shock, Shivan Fire, and Fiery Cannonade. But for the most part, it's business as usual for the White Weenie deck.
And how about on Owen's side of the table?
Owen has access to some interesting cards. I'm not exactly sure what his sideboard plan is for this matchup, but he has 2 Shivan Fires, just a Shock number 5 and 6. I can bet those are coming in. He has access to Murmuring Mystic, which is a pretty interesting card that can help him stabilize the board in the mid-game. And then there's a bunch of other options that he may turn to or may not. Stuff like Beacon Bolt, Star of Extinction, Entrancing Melodies number 2 and 3. So we'll see exactly what he chooses to do.
By the way, Owen was on a mulligan to 6 in game 1, and it looks like Matt's going to go down here on a mull. As somebody who likes playing these aggressive decks like mono white or red white aggro, it's always just like I feel like I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping my opponent doesn't have the sweeper. But I've heard a lot of people talk about how it's from the opposite side of the board. They're doing the same thing and hoping they just don't immediately die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these super fast white decks in particular, they do lend themselves to that dynamic of, well, do you have it or do you not have it? However, I've been kind of impressed with the white deck's ability to fight through the sweepers sometimes.
Right.
And that's the key, is sometimes. I mean, as you laid it out, Maria, there are draws that you have with the white deck where you sort of just go, okay, this hand is such where I'm playing out my creatures and crossing my fingers. But if you have a Danto Vanguard, if you have Dauntless Bodyguard at the right time, if you have nice refill type cards like a Johnny Adversary of Tyrants or Heroic Reinforcements, you can beat the sweepers sometimes, but they are just really powerful, and sometimes there's a little bit of randomness in the way they line up.
We are underway here in game number 2, Mono White Aggro versus Izzet Drakes. Sky Marcher Aspirant immediately taken down by one of those Shivan Fires that you mentioned. Adonto Vanguard, the follow-up play for Matt. Goblin Electromancer there for Owen. And Baffling End is going to immediately take care of that Electromancer. Another Sky Marcher Aspirant hits the table. Vanguard in for 3. And Matt is down to just 1 card left in hand, I believe. And removing the Goblin Electromancer is just so important, because if the Izzet Drakes deck is able to pay 1 mana for a lot of their spells, that's when it really starts to get out of control, forcing them to have to pay the full price.
Yep, yeah, so that's really some heads-up sharp sideboarding from Matt to bring in Baffling End, because normally, you know, you would think at a basic level that your removal spells want to match up against Crackling Drake and Arclight Phoenix, but Baffling End, the efficiency and the ability to answer Goblin Electromancer are actually coming in big here.
Discovery for Owen last turn, and attack here from Matt for 5. Matt left in hand with a land and a Conclave Tribunal. Here's an opt from Owen. Old school art on that opt. It's pretty cool.
Matching his invasion basic lands.
Nice.
If you'd like to know a nice story about Owen's basic lands.
Oh yeah, I heard about this.
So Owen and Shahar Shenhar practiced together for the World Championships, and afterwards Shahar was, you know, so grateful for the opportunity to work together with Owen and to borrow cards and everything like that. Just, you know, thankful for the help that Owen gave. That he and his family drove to a card store and they spent an hour digging through the land box to find 20 matching of each invasion basic land. They gave it to Owen as a gift.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was a really nice story. A little bit of you know, extra meaning behind the basic lands there too.
Here's Entrancing Melody taking that Adonto Vanguard over to Turtenwald's side of the table. Legion's Landing and the Vampire token in play for Matt. Gets in for 1. Turtenwald falls to 8. Matt at 21. And there's Crackling Drake, draw a card, play a land, pass a turn. And that is shields up from Turtenwald.
Yeah, so I can tell that Matt does have Conclave Tribunal to get rid of the Drake, but here you see Entrancing Melody coming in big again. In this case, stealing Adonto Vanguard, not that it's the greatest defensive creature, but that's a card that would have been really, really difficult for Owen to answer with almost anything else. The red removal spells just coming up short against the Vanguard.
And here's another sideboard card you mentioned in Murmuring Mystic. Here in an opt, coming along with a Huey Jensen bird token. And this card is so tough for the white decks to ever think about getting through. Like you mentioned, there is a Tribunal in Matt's hand, but already 1 token is just such a pain, even if it is just a 1/1 flyer. Bye, Huey. Yeah, Owen having that Vanguard in play was such a big game there. Because if Matt had been able to Tribunal the Drake, we would have gotten in for a little bit more damage.
Man, Murmuring Mystic doing its thing in Standard now, just as it's been doing in Limited since the release of Guilds of Ravnica. The 5 toughness on this card is just such a beating. I mean, you could see that even the largest creature on Matt Johnson's side of the battlefield could not attack into the Murmuring Mystic. But thankfully for him, he's able to take it out with Conclave Tribunal.
All right, so we've got an attack here from the Venerated Loxodon and the 2/2 Vampire token. And Owen is just going to happily double block there. leaving Matt with just a Loxodon in play and the unflipped landing. And at this point, Owen is massively up on cards. Here's an opt to draw even more.
Yeah, so we're into the late stages of the Izzet Drakes deck where the player is just carefully navigating out the race. How many attacks will it take from the Drake? How can I close the door on the game while leaving myself as well protected as possible? These are the things that Owen's thinking about on this turn.
All right, we kept it. Here's Tormenting Voice. There goes the Arclight into the yard. Goblin, Electromancer, and Shock were the draws. You also got to keep track of the number of spells you cast a turn here, too. Get that Phoenix back. And there is the handshake. Owen Turtenwald takes down this match 2-0. Izzet Drakes over mono white aggro. Yeah, and that was pretty cool, Reed. Both of those games we saw him stabilize at a very low life total.
Yeah, that was nicely done, I have to say, from Owen. The entrancing melodies really coming through big, and him just able to claw back. Also, sort of an unsung hero of that game was the Shivan Fire. It came off his sideboard. He played it on turn 1. Of course, it could have been the Shock, but the importance of having a 1-mana removal spell for turn 1 to keep pace against that white deck just can't be oversold.
All right, more Magic from this round coming at you in just a minute.